Okay, and we are live.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have a meeting of the Ways and Means Subcommittee subcommittee of the Revere School Committee. On tonight's agenda, we have one item, which is budgetary items. Before we get to that, we will have a roll call of the school committee members that are with us.
Mrs. Bronston Rizzo. I think you're muted.
I'm just wondering if we should
only
start
the
with
Ways
the
and
budget.
Means.
Oh, yeah, the Ways and Means
It's only
members.
Ways and Means, so
Okay.
it's not me.
Oh, Mr. Ferranti,
I'm here.
Mr. D'Ambrosio,
Here.
and the other member is
This tie.
Miss Ty.
Here.
Thank you.
Here.
Mr.
And-
Franti, you want to?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Diane, is Matt here tonight?
Matt is with us.
Okay. I think that what we should do is have Matt give us an overview, and then at that point, we'll start asking some questions. I mean, there's a lot of numbers there. I think we obviously need some explanations to them, and I think at that point, that'll start us off, and then we can ask questions from there.
Michael, I think you should acknowledge the other members of the committee that are present.
Absolutely. Right now, Mrs. Stacy Rizzo's here, and Fred Sinella, and Susan to be coming.
Thank you.
And the mayor.
Sorry, the man too.
The spreadsheet that Diane sent out, she actually crafted, and I participated in that process with her. So Diane, I'm ready to talk through it. I don't know if you had some bigger vision stuff to begin with, and then I can slide in like Michael was saying.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, obviously we have a lengthy budget process that we go through every year. And what's unique about this year is that our funding is different than it's been in decades. And by different, I mean that we have a lot more funding than we typically do have. And so what we were hoping to do today, Matt and Danielle and Richie and Lorenzo and I have been thinking a lot about how we can improve the district and ways to leverage this additional funding to really influence the outcomes for our students. And a lot of what impacted some of the decisions that we're hoping that we can all agree to tonight are the vast amount of input that we got from our community meetings just over a year ago, when we thought we were going to have some funding for fiscal 21, which we didn't realize because the pandemic caused the state to pull back the funding we anticipated from the Student Opportunity Act. And so what we are hoping to do tonight is to kind of set an overarching vision for this funding. The additional funding that we have on top of Student Opportunity Act right now is the ESSER grant money and the American Recovery Act money that is forthcoming. And both of those are sizable amounts as well. So I'm gonna share my screen so that I can project the spreadsheet that I emailed to the committee members and kind of take you through our thought process for how we're thinking of this funding. And I'm gonna start with a review of our current year, fiscal 21. Just put this away for a minute. Which you can see in this first column B that we have here in this spreadsheet. And you will recall that last year, the state gave us a little over $70 million in Chapter 70 funding. And they identified the local contribution to be just under 37 million. And our net school spending to be a little over 107 million. When we finalized our Schedule 19 negotiation with the city, and for those who are listening, the Schedule 19 is where we look at the different services that the city provides to the school department and the different services that the school department provides to the city. And we look at what those costs might be. So for example, a large one is employee health insurance. which the city pays. But so basically the school department pays their share of it for our employees through Schedule 19. And there are other pieces that go back and forth. For example, we run our own transportation, even though the state requires the city to run that. The school department oversees that, so the city actually gives us back additional money in Schedule 19 for operating the transportation program. So there are a lot of pieces that go back and forth on Schedule 19. And at the end of the day, for this current fiscal year, fiscal 21, when that was all finalized, we had just over $92 million left in our budget for school operations. In addition to that, we had a little bit under $8 million in carry forward that was available for the current school year. We had targeted about 7 million of that for teacher salaries. And that left us with about $878,000, which the school committee revisited this fall and agreed that we should leave that funding unspent because we were not sure at the time what our fiscal status would be for next school year, fiscal 22. So with all of that said and done, we had $99 million to operate the school department. And then we received some additional funding because of COVID. And you'll recall that in the first ESSER grant, we received $2.2 million. We received an additional $328,000 in remote learning technology grant, which we used to buy the Chromebooks that we gave out to students. And we also had almost 1.7 million in coronavirus relief funding. Most of that was targeted for the purchase of PPE and other things that we needed to ensure that our schools were safe. So our grand total, all of the money we had to spend for the school year was $103 million when you add all of that together. So let's compare that to where we are right now for next school year, fiscal 22. Our anticipated Student Opportunity Act funding is right about $11 million. And we realize that mostly in our Chapter 70 funding, which right now, and of course the state budget is not final, so these numbers are still subject to change. But based on the governor's budget, which was released in January, our Chapter 70 funding for next school year, fiscal 22, will be just over $80 million. And the local contribution required from the city of Revere is $38.5 million. Our required net school spending is $118 million. And these are all figures that we get from the Department of Education. They post them on their website, and that's where this money comes from. We did do our Schedule 19 negotiation with the city. And when that was finalized, our school department budget went to just under 102 million. So you can see it's a sizable increase from what it was last year, from 92 million to 101 million. In addition to all of that, because of the way the school year happened, for example, we had budgeted a lot of extra money for transportation, anticipating that we would need additional buses to bring kids back and forth to school. However, because we stayed in a remote learning environment for most of the school year, we did not spend all of that money. And so what Matt anticipates right now, and this won't be finalized until the summer months, but having knowledge of budget and paying attention to our expenses and what's going out, we actually anticipate this year that we'll have about $11 million in carry forward. It might be 10.5, it might be 11.5, but we're anticipating it'll be right around $11 million. And our goal for this year is to again carry about 7 million of that for teacher salaries and have the remaining 4 million as carry forward pass through into next fiscal year, which would be fiscal 23. And I'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. But if these numbers were to stay exactly as they are, it would mean that this year we would have $108.7 million to spend on the school district. Again, that's a sizable jump over last year's budget, this current school year's budget. But on top of that, we've received a grant award of $6.5 million for our ESSER 2. And we anticipate, we don't have our numbers yet for ESSER 3. We've been told that they will come out in May. That's the American Recovery Act money. But we've been told that we can anticipate that it's going to be about 2.2 times greater than this ESSER 2 number. And so conservatively, we are estimating that will be about 17.5 million. And so when you add all of that in, it means that for this coming school year, we actually have $132 million that we could spend just in this next school year on our school department. That's a $30 million, almost a $30 million increase over last year, which is absolutely astronomical. And, you know, it's the kind of funding that we should have had phased in over the last 2 decades that we haven't had, you know, maybe minus the ESSER money, which is really targeted to help us make sure that we have all students where they need to be educationally, despite having lost almost a full year of school. When we look at the cost to carry over the exact same services that we provided this year in fiscal 21 to fiscal 22, Matt has that at $105 million. And that's because there are obviously cost increases year to year in the budget. Some of them are fixed cost increases, like the increase in the cost to heat our buildings and run electricity, and the same kind of things that we all see in our homes. The same services that we have in our homes cost a little bit more every year. But there are also salary increases and other adjustments that cost this number, that force this number to go up annually. So with that $105 million anticipated cost to carry the same services, it means that we would have 27 million available to create new services. And if we wanted to, we could split that any way we want. We could say, let's spend all $27 million on new salaries and hire a lot more teachers and paraprofessionals and all other jobs that we have in the school department. Or we could say, let's not do any of that. Let's spend $27 million on building upgrades. And there are pluses and minuses to both of those options. With the salary option, a challenge would be that next year we would have no money to maintain all of those new salaries. And with if we spent all of that money just on building upgrades, then it would mean that the direct services to our students wouldn't improve. Their learning environments would improve, but their direct services wouldn't change from how they are right now. And one thing that we know is that we need a lot more direct services to our students. We need to have more on-demand intervention so that when a student is struggling on a particular math topic or struggling in reading or struggling in science, whatever the case may be, we have people on hand who right away can intervene with that child and help them so they can get back on track with their classmates and not have to look at that gap in learning exacerbating over a whole school year and then waiting to have a summer intervention program or something like that. But either way, there are provisions in the law for both ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 that we can spread those over multiple years. And we think that's the fiscally prudent thing to do. So rather than look at this $27 million and say, let's spend it all, really 23 of which is one-time money, one-time funding, that it would be better for us to both spread the ESSER money over multiple years, but also look at our base budget and use what's available to us in the state law for school spending and be a little bit more fiscally prudent even with that money, so that when the ESSER funding is gone, which is after three school years, and I'll explain more of that in a minute, we still have some of our own money through the carry forward. I'll go back up here to where we were saying that we wanted to take $4 million and let that flow through. We can do that year after year. And that would allow us to take the ESSER funding and really spread it over what Matt and I have come up with, along, with help from Danielle and Richie and Lorenzo, is a 5-year plan for this spending. And that's what I'd like to talk to you a little more about now. But before I go on, well, maybe I should go on and do that and then take questions, if there's anything I've said already that didn't make sense to people.
Diane, I have one question.
Mhm.
This anticipated SOA, obviously it's a big time number and it sort of tilts the budget one way or the other. When would we have an idea if that's going to happen? Because anticipated to me means it could happen and it couldn't happen. And if we're building a budget around an $11 million figure, when is a date that we know we're either going to get it or not get it?
So we know that we're getting it. And we got the $11 million. Matt and I backtracked our budget this year from our budget last year and looked at enrollment. And, there are so many components to the school budget, how they define what our Chapter 70 is. We went through all of those nooks and crannies and were able to look at what our increase was and attribute $11 million of that to the Student Opportunity Act. And that funding will happen this year. It's in the law. Last year, they changed the law to pull the money back, but it's in there this year. And that actually represents a 1/7 amount of the full funding of the Student Opportunity Act. And that's because when the law went into effect over a year ago, it was supposed to start last year. They plan to implement over 7 years. And I will tell you that we just got news yesterday that there was some controversy at the state because they were still with this $11 million for us, but whatever the numbers are for other districts, they were still doing a 1/7 calculation. And the joint committee, Senate Ways and Means and House Ways and Means, the joint committee yesterday made the decision to move that to 1/6, which means it'll actually be a little bit higher than the 11 million, but we don't have enough details yet to project what it's going to be. But they took the letter of the law to say that this will be fully implemented 7 years after the law was passed, which is 6 years from now. So that's there. The question, Michael, that's a great question, is we can't guarantee that 2 years from now or 3 years from now, there's not some other crisis that causes the state to pull back on this funding law. It would take another crisis like the coronavirus in order for the legislature to legally be able to pull back that way. So we're pretty secure that the money is there, but none of us can predict the future. And that's why we want to be, especially fiscally prudent in the coming years and not look at any of this money as an absolute guarantee until we know that the state has certified our budgets.
All right, I'd like to give my other members of the committee, Carol, do you have any questions, Carol?
Just my recollection about the amount of money that we can carry forward, the limit on that and how that's figured out.
Yep. So there are, and I'll defer to Matt on this in a minute, but there are a couple of different bodies of money that we're allowed to carry forward. We are allowed to carry forward 5% of our annual budget right off the top. But we are also allowed to carry forward some other funding that we get kind of in an arrears arrangement. So for example, our circuit breaker funding, which we get a year after it's actually happened, we're allowed to flow
Yeah.
through that money. And our charter school reimbursement funding, we're allowed to let that flow through to a next fiscal year. I don't know, Matt, anything else there that,
No, that's exactly right. We're required to spend at least 95% of our net school spending figure. So we'll make sure to do that each year. And then there are some funds that have kind of a 2-year window of when you would actually credit them to your accounts, so you can use them in the timing that you need the most. Both of those play together to enable us to
Mhm.
manage what our carry forward number would be.
Mhm. Thank you.
Anthony, you have any questions, Anthony?
No, I mean, that was a pretty succinct explanation. I will say that, plans with carry forward and plans to sort of make this new pot of money more sustainable going forward are prudent, as you mentioned, and necessary if we're going to get the full use of whatever fantastic resources are going to come out of this over the course of the next year or 2 or 3. So with that in mind, happy to move forward.
Stacy, you have any questions, Stacy?
No questions, but I am happy to hear Diane say about planning ahead over multiple years. And we need to be transparent because this is more money than anyone has ever spent in K through 12 education in American history. And it's up to us as a school committee to make sure that people feel that this is a good investment, no matter which way we vote on this. And to keep in mind, it is one-time funding and then it's gone. And we do have till 24 to make a commitment, not necessarily spend it, but to at least make a commitment. So, I mean, I'm happy if we can at least even take a big hit of 50% and then the rest carry forward. And, I am happy though that you're talking about over multiple years, Diane.
okay. So let me take us into our,
Diane, let me just ask Freddie, give him a
sorry.
chance.
No,
Okay,
I'm
Freddie.
okay. That was very good, very nicely explained, and it's nice to hear that with everything that's going on, that there's actually surplus, which is, I'm sure, will be put to good use.
yeah,
Can I just make one comment, Diane?
sure.
On the ESSER 3 grant, where the first year you have 75, 45, and 54, is it maybe prudent just to flip the third year and the first year, make the first year 54 and the last year 75, where we run out of ESSER 2 money that year?
Yeah, sure. Let me go to that spreadsheet now, and we can talk more details on that. So this is a larger looking spreadsheet, and I apologize to people who are not numbers people, because I know that this can be anxiety inducing when you see all of these numbers on a page. But I'll talk through a little bit, Michael, and then we can get to that question, okay?
Okay, that's fine.
So just looking at the beginning of this spreadsheet, these beginning columns are exactly what we just talked about. They're the same numbers. But what we've done is a little bit of a projection, again, anticipating what our Student Opportunity Act funding will be. You'll see I listed them out here. And let me just check and make sure. Do you guys see a different spreadsheet now?
Yeah.
Yes, I
know
do.
sometimes on Zoom you have to like stop sharing and reshare, but okay. So we projected out if the Student Opportunity Act continues to maintain as we anticipate it will be, then our $118 million in net school spending that we anticipated this year, we project would go up to 129 in fiscal 23, to 140 in fiscal 24, and so on and so forth. You can read across.
Wow.
It's pretty incredible to think that in 7 years' time we'll be close to doubling our budget from what it was in FY21, almost. It's
Right.
an incredible thing. And of course, all of these numbers, what will our Chapter 70 be? That's dependent on our enrollment. If it stays the same, then we can anticipate these to be accurate numbers. If our enrollment goes up, these numbers will go up. If our enrollment goes down, these numbers will go down. As I said before, it's a very complicated and involved formula that determines our Chapter 70 funding. The poverty level in the city has a huge impact on what our Chapter 70 funding is, and also on what the local contribution is. So we've left these blank because we cannot anticipate that, but we feel like, Matt and I feel like these are some pretty secure numbers to think about as we plan forward. And then just adding in anticipated increases in costs for the shared programs that we do through Schedule 19, we think the numbers will go up by about 7,500, 7.5 million each year in our school department budget after Schedule 19 is settled. And a part of a good chunk of that is because we anticipate that we'll use a chunk of the money that we have this year for new positions. And a large added expense to new positions that often get hidden in the budget is the cost of health insurance. For a family plan, it's about $20,000 per employee. And so when you add 100 or so new positions, you really increase that cost of health insurance. And that's where you see a difference in the amount of money that we have in Schedule 19. So with using these numbers, and again, with the huge disclaimer that all of this is subject to the state budgeting, but we still need to anticipate what's going forward. And with another piece in mind, I mentioned that we anticipate this year we'll have $11 million in carry forward, which is a really unusual circumstance. We're not typically that high at all, but it's because of the COVID pandemic that we find ourselves there. Our goal would be to reduce the amount of carry forward that we're relying on every year and actually get closer and closer to our true net school spending amount every year. And so you'll see that the budget that we're forecasting causes that number to go down. We always want to have some money in a carry forward account so that it's like a rainy day fund. If something goes sideways, we can deal with it. But we also want to be spending in ways that our kids are getting everything that they need and deserve. So we want to have some carry forward, but we don't want to have tremendous amounts. And so looking at that, we also want to reduce our reliance on carry forward to pay teacher salaries. We want to move teachers off of this carry forward line item and into our regular budget. And as you see this number goes down, that's how we become less reliant on the carry forward. So if I come back to this year and look at these three numbers that we talked about on the last spreadsheet, this is for next year, fiscal 22, we anticipate that we'll have $11 million in carry forward. We know we're going to need about 7 million of that to carry our existing teacher salaries. And we want to leave 4 million in our carry forward pass through, almost like our savings account going forward. And we want to we anticipate we'll do the same thing with about $3 million in fiscal 23 and about $1.5 million in fiscal 24. And the reason this number of pass through is going down is partly a function because the money that we're holding is going down and keeping us to that 5% number that we talked about for allowable carry forward. So with that, with those numbers in mind, I'll come back to the school year coming up. There's the 108 million that we talked about. And then here is our ESSER 2 funding that is about 6.5 million and our anticipated ESSER 3 at 17.5 million. And what we propose to do is spend roughly half of the ESSER 2 this year and more than half for next year. And that kind of speaks to what you were talking about, Michael, about saving larger sums for subsequent years that are a little bit less sure than we are for next school year, even though we're not completely sure about next school year either. And the rule for spending in ESSER 2 is that it has to be spent by the end of FY23. And that's why that's only spread over 2 years. We could use some of it now if we wanted to in FY21. We don't need to do that because we have the carry forward money and we have our ESSER 1 money that we're still spending. We feel secure right now for this school year and for our summer programming. So ESSER 2, we have spread over the 2 years that we're allowed to spread it over. And then ESSER 3, we know right now that we're allowed to spread that over 3 years. So that's why you see some of it in FY20, the year coming up, FY, which I forget now, 22.
22.
And then some for FY23 and a larger amount for FY24. And another thing that I'll mention about this that could have an impact on how we do these projections when we get to a final budget this year is that there is talk at the federal level about allowing that American Recovery Act funding to be spread over 5 years instead of 3 years. So if that happens, and again, that's just talk right now, that's something we might not find out about until May or June or July or August. But that's something that we could look at and say, well, let's spread that money out more and have less of our carry forward flowing through from year to year. Like we'll be able to make those adjustments as we become more certain about exactly what the budget is and where all of these line items are going to go. But if we do that, assuming that it stays over the 3 years, reserving our carry forward pass through as we did gives us this bit of money here. It's about $8.5 million that we project to flow through, that then we would spend about $4 million in fiscal 25, 2.5 in fiscal 26, and about $500,000 in fiscal 27. And the reason that it's higher initially and then getting lower is because our Student Opportunity Act funding is increasing at the same time. So it's taking a combination of those two things together. And when we do that, we come down to these total figures and total spending for each of the years, projecting across, knowing that we need more money each year just to maintain level services. This gives an idea of what the additional spending would be year over year. It's fairly stable at about 5 million. Out here, we get to 7 million. And again, in year 3 or year 4, these last years could change depending on what the state does. We can also anticipate that there might be greater federal spending on K through 12 schools in general, which could impact this. If our Chapter 70 is redefined by the federal government, then that could have a huge impact here, as could our Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV grants. There are a lot of different ways that this could be impacted. And we're not suggesting at all that we look at this spreadsheet tonight and try to stick to this for 7 years. We're suggesting that this is how we can think about this money for the next 7 years and revisit it every year as we do our budget and have more definite information about what the budget's going to be annually. This is our projection for maintenance of existing services. We put a straight like 4% increase. It might not actually be 4%, which might mean that we have a little bit more money to spend year to year, or it could be larger than 4%, in which case we'd have to adjust for that. But if we follow this plan and spend about $13 million in new money this year, and then become a little bit more fiscally prudent, but still have, now this would calculate in the cost of any new positions that we add. This calculates in the cost of additional health insurance for new employees, all of those different pieces. Matt and I felt comfortable looking at this and saying that we could spend about $6.5 million on new salaries and be able to maintain them going forward and still have this bit of a cushion each year, $5 million next year, and then 5 million the year after, then 6 million and 6 million, and so on and so forth. It's pretty stable over a 7-year run. And so that next year we could look at this and say, well, we have $5 million additional to spend. Do we want to put some of that into even more new positions and more salaries? Or do we want to spend it only on one-time expenses like building improvements and things like that? Or is there a large jump in our charter school enrollment that is bringing money out of our budget? Or is there a large increase in the number of students who are receiving special education outplacement services that could hit our budget differently? It gives us a nice, comfortable cushion over the next 7 years, but still allows us to do a lot in terms of direct services to students and families, and also meet some of the unfulfilled non-salary needs that we've been, unable to meet in recent years because we simply didn't have funding to do it. So if that makes sense, maybe I'll pause here and see if there are any questions now, and then we can get into the details of how we looked at the feedback we got from the community and teachers and everybody last year, and then also a new round of input from principals and our facilities director and our technology director and curriculum directors and other people over the recent weeks to think about how we might spend this money.
Carol, do you have any questions?
Well, I'm blown away, actually, when I think of the enormity of the amount of money when we have suffered for so long. It's just wonderful that we have that. Diane, expenses for the coming summer school. We know that we need to have a robust program. And we may be thinking about having a more robust program or even an extended year at some period of time. Because certainly our kids need as much as they can possibly get. So that must be something that we need to be considering. I believe that we should have a combination of the two. I mean, I know that when we've been listening to everyone, it's about dealing with kids with social emotional problems, which has been right. And I guess, of course, we could have predicted that, but which has been terrible. I hear that from parents. One of the things about how much trouble their children are having, and they're going to need a robust program to deal with that and to deal with the academics too in the summer. And I think going forward, we might want to continue with something like that. So, and I'm trying to think about crucial needs that we have in some of our buildings. Certainly, we know as we've been going around and making improvements, and we've committed a great deal of money to those. There is still much more that we need done. So I think it's very important, of course, it goes without saying, but that we need to find that fine line between personnel, increasing personnel, and dealing with services for the children first, but also coming up with what's really needed in the building so they continue to be safe and conducive to good education. I have every confidence that Matt and Diane and the rest of the leadership team and all of our people, because they have done so much during this pandemic. And I expect them to continue to do that. Thank you.
Anthony, any questions?
Oh, again, that was pretty comprehensive. Thank you.
Okay. Stacy, any questions? Stacy, you there?
She's saying no, Michael. She's
Okay.
No, thank you.
Freddie?
Michael, just you, Diane, with the upcoming new high school, will any of this money play out to help maybe site review planning or anything else that we would have to appropriate?
That is the mayor's obligation.
Okay, okay.
To that point, though, I will say that Dr. Kelly and I have talked about how we can leverage dollars to get the most bang for our buck, right? We have 30 million coming on the city side. There's obviously an infusion of cash on the school district side. So the planning that we're doing, one of the most important pieces that we're looking at from the city side is how we can leverage every penny that we have against federal, state programming and other funding that's available, and also the schools. So it is our responsibility, but we always look for opportunities to partner up.
We do. And there's one that I'm going to share with the committee in a few minutes that we've been talking about that would impact this funding in a fairly significant way, but I'll hold that for just a minute if we can. Let's see if any other questions, Michael.
Diane, I asked you about the ESSER grant. Is there any consideration like flipping the first and third year?
Yeah, and we can all look at spending this differently. So we could look at making this be the 5,400, the 5.5 million roughly, and putting the 7.5 million over here. We can, rearrange this however the committee deems is most suitable. The reason these numbers are what they are right now is based on the requests from school personnel right now, like the IT department and the maintenance department, and staffing requests from schools and directors. But the committee certainly has the purview to say, we want to implement that, but not until 2 years from now, or we can move this money around however we all see fit. And I will say that there are still pieces that need to tie in, like when we get our actual amount for ESSER 3, that could be higher. It could also be lower. And when we think about what I said at the state, where the Joint Committee on Ways and Means has said we're going to give 1/6 of SOA this year instead of the 1/7 that we see represented in the 11 million, there'll be some more wiggle room there. So, Michael, we could absolutely move this around.
Well, the one thing, Diane, I'm a little bit concerned about is, where we're in good shape for the next couple of years. Going to, once the ESSER 2 grant runs out and the ESSER 3 runs out, I'm a little bit concerned that, say the funding starts to dry up a little bit and we're sort of not ready for it. And I realize it's only $2 million, but still, I think, where things are really going to be good the next couple of years, just to shift it, just to be on the safe side. You can always shift it back. It's just a thought I had, that's all.
Yeah. And we're hoping that this money, which isn't dependent on the grant, would help carry us through a situation like that. But you're right, Michael, we can definitely look at that.
That's all, just to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one other thing I wanted to point out on this spreadsheet is that you see these numbers down the bottom, planned salary, and then you see these two numbers, planned non-salary. And those three numbers all came directly from the feedback that we got from the community and from staff around what we need to prioritize in staffing, and also what we needed to prioritize in terms of facility upgrades and technology, and making sure that we have the right infrastructure to ensure a safe learning environment for all kids. And I'll go into the salary detail first. One of the things that we're hoping will happen tonight, we know this is, as I said earlier, one of our goals was to set a vision for budgeting so that we know that we're all on the same page in terms of not just blowing all of this money in year one. And it sounds like the feedback from all of you is that we're in agreement on that. So that's helpful. But we're also hoping that with the positions that we wanted, the new positions that we want to create, that we could get moving on our hiring sooner than later, so that we have access to the vast pools of candidates that are available right now, but that are never available to us when we don't get our budget finalized until June, and then we can't start hiring until July or August. And most of the people have been already signed to contracts in districts where they're typically able to start that process earlier than we are, because they're not as literally dependent on their budget as we've been over the last couple of decades. This is the first time we've really had an opportunity to do some early hiring. And I know that despite how busy everybody is, our schools and our principals and our directors and everybody are anxious to get moving on that, as are we. So I'm going to switch to the next spreadsheet and just go over all of those positions that we've been talking about. And the majority of them, they fall into different categories, and I've separated them out here for all of you to get a sense of that. But in total, we've had requests for 8 additional ELL teachers, English learner teachers, 6 additional social workers. Both of those groups of people will go to providing direct services to students and meeting their individual needs. We want to introduce a broader health and wellness program. We need an additional health teacher at the high school. We only have 1 at this point, which is not sufficient. And we want to introduce a new health program at the elementary level. So we want to add 2 positions there. In addition, one of the gaps that we've seen is that we don't have an adaptive PE program for our students with special needs, especially those that have some physical different abilities. And so we want to hire 3 phys ed teachers, 2 of them to do adaptive PE, 1 at the elementary level, 1 at the secondary level, so middle schools and high school. And they would work directly with our small learning groups to ensure those kids have some physical learning as well, physical education. And we also want to add a regular phys ed teacher at the high school. Right now, those class sizes are in the upper 30s and sometimes at 40 even. So we want to reduce the class size there by adding another teacher. We have need for 2 more specialists, OT, speech, and physical therapy. And we want to add 7 additional special educators across the district. In addition, we have 12 positions here in different disciplines for interventionists. And these are the kind of folks that we talked about earlier in the meeting. They're licensed teachers who are available to work with our students who are performing a little bit below grade level or significantly below grade level, and can do on-demand pull-out intervention with those kids to get them back on track and on target in real time. Right now, because we don't have as many of these interventionists as we need, excuse me, we're not able to provide that service to students when they need it in a timely manner. Instead, they wait months or sometimes even a whole school year, where if we could provide that intervention for a 4-week or a 6-week targeted period during the school year, we could prevent these kids from being behind at the end of the school year. And it's as much work as we've done on providing the Massachusetts tiered system of interventions, and as much training as we've done for teachers, we haven't had the resources necessary to really implement a tier 1 program that prevents students from being targeted or identified as needing an IEP or special education services on a regular basis. And we think that by increasing the staff this way, we would be able to do more of that. We want to add elective opportunities. And so we've had requests from the Susan B. Anthony, the Garfield, and the Rumney Marsh to increase their encore teachers. And that varies by school. Garfield Elementary, I know, is looking for a music teacher, an additional music teacher. The middle schools have different ideas on what their electives would be, but they want to give kids more options in what they study. And this is a position that we have seen but not filled several times at the high school for a music theater position, which we feel is really important. The Hill School wants to add a nurse position, which is commensurate with their student enrollment. They really do need another one. They're one of our larger schools that doesn't have access to 2 nurses the way Garfield or the Wayland do, even though those schools, I'll acknowledge, have 2 schools in them. 2 additional social studies teachers, one at Seacoast and one at Garfield Middle School. A financial literacy teacher at the high school. An additional STEM teacher at each of our middle schools. And that's so that we can better implement the Project Lead the Way program. In order to implement Project Lead the Way, the teachers have to complete a training course and be certified to teach that. So we want to hire some folks who can do that. There's an additional physics teacher at the high school, an additional biology teacher. We've been asked for 6 additional consulting teachers or coaching positions in various areas. And these folks would function a lot like our math coaches or literacy coaches or the consulting teachers currently do. One of the areas we want to have a consulting teacher in is around restorative practices, and another one is around deeper learning. Those are 2 focal areas for the district as we move to more student-centered learning and competency-based grading. We want to have some folks who are well-versed in those areas be able to support our teachers as they transition and help increase the district capacity to really instruct in those ways. And of course, the restorative practices coach would help with the equity work that we're doing and make sure that our teachers are growing in their tools that they have to draw on as they practice equitable practices in the classroom. And there are a couple of others there in terms of student well-being. We want to have a mindfulness coach who can help our teachers work on mindfulness practices that then can be implemented during advisory periods or open circle, things of that nature. BCBA for our SEL plan. This is a plan that we presented to you 2 years ago, and we have been able to add 1 team of a BCBA and school psychologist. We had talked about having multiple teams that would be assigned to particular schools so that the BCBA could go in and assist a teacher in doing some observational work on a student's behavioral challenges, and the school psychologist could step in and give some supports to those kids before a child was referred for an outplacement due to behavior issues or anything of that nature. And so we're proposing 3 more of those teams, and that would increase our total teaching force by 67 persons at a cost of about a little over $4 million. Along these lines, we also targeted some funding for additional supports. With 67 new teachers, we're going to need more mentors. We're going to need more PLG facilitators. We want to increase, we've been paying our equity advisors. This is part of our equity work. Right now, we're paying them a small stipend for the additional work they do in their schools through the Nellie Mae grant that Dr. Garcia procured for the district, but that funding won't be available next year. So we want to make sure that we can continue to have our equity advisors and make sure that their work is honored with a small honorarium. It's a short amount of money, but we need to work that into our own budget since the Nellie Mae funding won't be available next year. As you know from our talk about the new high school, one of the things that we want to start working on is career pathways. And one of the ones that we have had some progress in recent years, largely due to Josh Miranda and the work he's done with FIRST Robotics and bringing that not just to the high school, but also to the middle school and elementary schools. And so that's what that we want to expand that program by having more staff members. Right now, it's basically Josh running all of that across the whole district. And what we'd like to do is have dedicated robotics coaches at the middle school level and at the elementary level, so that we can engage kids earlier in the kind of thinking and work that goes into a robotics program, so they can learn more about programming and how that works and really get that career pathway off the ground. It's the kind of thing that we would hope to do in our other targeted career pathways that we've identified through the work of the Metro Boston Regional Workforce Development Program around hospitality and biotechnology. But we thought that where we already had some work in place around robotics, that would be a good initial place to start this year. The discretionary stipends for directors. Right now, our curriculum directors have discretionary funding for budget so that they can buy supplies and materials that teachers need for their classrooms. What they don't have is funding so that they can collaborate with teachers outside of work hours to develop curriculum or performance tasks or things like that. And so we wanted to create a small budget for each of the 8 curriculum directors to have that flexibility to pay teachers to do some work outside of school hours to further our initiatives around deeper learning and student-centered learning. And along that same path, we want to reintroduce lead teachers at the high school level so that we have somebody, an individual who's leading that work in each of our disciplines, from math to art to phys ed to science to humanity to English or history, all of them. And we anticipate about that we would want about 10 positions there. I don't know why this, so it's, okay, it's 99 stipend positions for about $232,000. Okay, and then there are 53 staff positions that we'd like to change. Many of them are paraprofessionals. We had talked last year when we thought we were going to have the Student Opportunity Act funding about providing kindergarten paraprofessionals in each of our kindergarten classrooms. And we had also talked about engaging our paraprofessionals to serve as bus monitors, not moonitors, but actually monitors, to work with our special needs kids, or even on some of our other buses, to ensure that our bus drivers can safely focus on the road and not be worrying about what's happening in the seats behind them. So one of these proposals, this proposal, is to move a number of paraprofessional positions to full-time, which we would see as this added expense, which would give, we think, it would give us the opportunity to hire people who are able to work a full day and create a stronger relationship between our paraprofessionals and our classroom teachers, our schools, our parents, our students, and everybody. And along those same lines, we've had a tremendous amount of success with our parent liaisons this year that we were able to introduce through our ESSER funding. And so we're proposing to use additional funding to make those full-time positions. Right now, they're part-time. And we really think that we could leverage the work that they've done engaging families has been absolutely incredible. And it's one of the things that Dr. Garcia will be sharing in an upcoming school committee meeting. Some of the parent liaisons are actually going to come and talk to you about their work. But we propose moving those to full-time positions. We want to add 2 tradespeople to our maintenance team so that we can continue to ensure that we're doing the right work to maintain our buildings and, you know, keep our facilities at a high level that ensures an adequate learning environment for our students. We want to add 3 additional translator security positions, and we're still figuring out exactly where they would be, but we're thinking one at the West Riviera, one at the Garfield complex, and the third one I listed as district, perhaps at the Parent Information Center, or perhaps at one of our other buildings. We think that we need to do a little bit more thinking about that. We want to add 5 positions to our regular bus monitor group, just so that we can have a bus monitor on every single one of our bus runs. I'm advocating for an increase to our facility director's salary. Right now, it is not commensurate with what other facility directors make, nor is it commensurate with what we see on some of the city side facility director or similar role salaries. So I'm making that recommendation to the school committee. And with all of this additional funding coming in, the burden on our business office is going to increase substantially. And so we're recommending an additional clerk's position in the business office to help manage all of this additional money that's going to be flowing through the school district. Moving up. For administrators, Mr. Mogavero has told me that I can make it publicly known that he'll be retiring at the end of this year. And one of the things that we had talked about doing last year is actually splitting his position into 2. In the many years, I don't even know really how Mr. Mogavero has done his job for the last 5 years, because the volume of English learner students in the district has increased at least quadruple what it was when he first took that program on, after having been in charge of our world languages department. So the increase in student enrollment for world languages is certainly one thing, but the needs of our English learner students and the number of them warrants that program be supervised by an individual who can dedicate full time to their learning and to their needs and to overseeing our English learner teachers and that whole program. And technically, Danielle just pointed out to me, we listed both of those as new positions, and technically they're not. One of those positions would be funded through Mr. Mogavero's salary after he retires. But so there you see a director of English learner world languages separated from the Parent Information Center. We want our Parent Information Center to certainly be a hub for all families coming in, and separating those jobs out will enable that to happen more readily. Going back to the administration for a minute, one of the things that we had also talked about last year and in our community meeting is the need for an additional second assistant principal at our 3 larger elementary schools, the Garfield, the Wayland, and the Hill. In those buildings, we have just so many kids and so many needs, academic needs and social emotional needs, that the staff really needs the support of an additional administrator to help oversee that. And it makes sense that we would be increasing our administrative staff really by only 4 positions when we're going to have so many additional staff members across the board in the district. And so going back up to district-wide staff, we are advocating for a human resources officer. I think the committee knows how much we need that position. We've needed it for several years to manage staff benefits and ensure that staff are getting the services they need and connected to the services that they need. But we also need it in light of our needs around union collaboration and grievance processes that have escalated of late, as the committee's aware. So we've held off on filling that position, even though we've been encouraged to do so and taken the burden on ourselves to do all of that work. But I think that we've certainly reached a point where that could be its own full-time position. And another place that we've recognized need, and we've heard this from the community and from parents and even from members of the school committee, is that we need to do a better job communicating. And one way that we can make sure that happens is by having somebody who is a communications coordinator and can ensure that information is updated in a timely fashion on our website, and that our website is accessible and usable and available in multiple languages, and just that we're getting all of the information out that we need to. Whew, it's a lot of talking. So those are the recommendations that we're making around staff. And as I said, to Mr. Ferranti's point, we do have some mobility, but this is where we landed right now. And this is not by any means a final budget. What we would like tonight is permission from the school committee to proceed in this direction. And I just got a message that my screen stopped sharing. So I closed that for a minute. I'll share again in a second. But so that we can begin to start transitioning and filling these positions. We know that in some cases, like with the coaching positions or the assistant principal positions or the director positions, that where we might have some staff transferring, and would like to get those balls rolling, so to speak, as soon as we can, so that we can start interviewing new candidates for all of that. So I'll pause again for questions, and then I'll go into the non-salary piece.
All right, Carol, I'll start with you. Any questions?
It's a dream come true. I mean, I think that's the proposal that we've been presented with represents exactly what we heard the people from the community say that they wanted and needed, what our teachers have said that they wanted and needed. And I appreciate the need to start doing this immediately, because you get the best when you start the earliest, because you have enough time. But if you're looking through the summer and we're starting in July to do this, then it's very, very difficult. So I would support the superintendent in her request to do this as quickly as possible.
Anthony?
Sorry, folks, I was on mute. But I'm in agreement with Ms. Ty in this situation. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation as always.
Stacy?
Question, what would, you talked about director for curriculums as positions. You wanted 10 more?
Lead teacher?
No. I thought it was, I'm looking through the sheets, but of course they fell, so nothing's in order.
Let me share again and see. Stacy, can you see my screen?
I can, up.
I'm looking for the number 10.
It might not even been 10, so, hold on.
We have one
Hold
director.
on.
We have one director position.
Nope, not that. Holy moly. Okay, down. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
There's only 2 10s, the mentors and the lead teachers.
Well, it might not have been 10. It was curriculum. That's it? That's all you've shown?
Yeah, that's it.
I don't know. I'll go through my papers.
I think you
and I'll come-
when I was talking about the lead teachers, I said that they would be in the different curricular areas. Like
No,
math,
no,
English?
it wasn't lead teachers because I know what the lead teachers are.
Okay.
I'm going to have to think about it. I think most of these positions are absolutely, without a doubt, very well needed. I'm afraid about starting the paraprofessional full-time after it took so many years to try to save with the health benefits and making it all part-time. And you're talking about adding 30 full-time health technicians. Not health technicians, paraprofessionals.
Mhm.
That I'm not really crazy about. And in this, did we hire all the health technicians that we were supposed to? Because I don't see it in this list.
We did, but they were funded through our other money.
Oh, I thought it was SOA it was coming through.
No, that came through the SR1 grant.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna have to rethink what I was looking at. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
I understand your hesitation on the paraprofessionals, and I know that the move to part-time for all paraprofessionals was done at a time when the budget was tight and getting tighter
Absolutely,
and getting
yeah.
tighter.
Well, we
but it-
never had, no, there were always part-time positions. There were a handful, like maybe 30 that were full-time.
Right, that's
Yeah.
right.
And
So,
I know that over the years, the intention was that as full-time people left, unless it was required in a child's IEP that they have a full-time paraprofessional,
Right.
that they were replaced with 2 part-timers. So the number of full-time paraprofessionals has gone down over the years. And I just think that when somebody has a full-time job with benefits, it's a different level of attraction
Yeah,
for
you're
people
right.
to take the job. So you do get, we have a lot of phenomenal paras who are part-time and only want to work part-time. And
Mhm.
that's terrific. And that's great. And we want to maintain those positions so that we can keep those people. But every year we lose great paras who get a full-time job in Everett with benefits or in Chelsea with benefits. And that's becoming a real competition point for us. That we're losing really good paras because they need often more than the salary, they need the benefits. They need to have the health insurance in order to make the job work for them. And Richie's not here tonight because he's doing the call with the physicians that we usually do on Thursday nights.
I thought he was off because of his birthday.
I didn't even wish him a happy birthday, but I'll do that tomorrow. But no, he's on another call that goes until 10:30, but he would be able to tell you that it's been a problem, and we can see it in the attrition of our paraprofessionals over the years. So I understand what you're saying. I think that right now we have an opportunity, and I don't know if, maybe that's some kind of contract language that we could try to work on as we negotiate with the paras this year.
I mean, because I know they want all paras full-time. And if that's the case, we only need half of them. Then you're laying off people, and that's not a good thing.
You're all set, Stacy?
Yes, I am.
Freddie, I'm
Michael,
giving
if
you
I-
the opportunity. I want
Oh.
Freddie and Susan to speak, then Cal, we'll come back to you, okay?
Sure. Yeah, I was
All
just
right,
gonna make it.
All right, Michael, thank you. I'm a little amazed with how we're functioning without all these people. This looks like Santa Claus's wish come true in July. Where are you going to put all these people? I mean, right now, people don't have, they're working in closets, they're working double teaming in classrooms. And the term was mentioned, part-time to full-time. You alluded to the fact that every full-time person benefits alone at $20,000. I realize that there's money there, but there's such a thing as, I think overdoing it, Diane. You're looking to add 2 more personnel to maintenance. I mean, we have 6 or 7 of them now. The buildings are all relatively new. So, I mean, I think that there are areas that are really becoming excessive. And I just don't, you're talking about raises, you're talking about stuff that's negotiated in contracts. I mean, if you want to put money aside for negotiations that we can come up with this, but I mean, this is overwhelming. And I agree with what Carol, I mean, this is a dream come true, but I mean, I'm overwhelmed. I mean, the work that you've put into this, Diane, is awesome. But I mean, there's still got to be justification of amounts that are being paid and who's being promoted. And all these hires, are they going to take place now, or do they take place, you hire them now, but come September? School is, we're middle of April vacations coming up. I mean, you put these people on the payroll now, it's just going to be staggering. And I'll let it go at that when we come a little more specifics, but I just, wow. Thank you.
I know it's overwhelming. It really is. I think that one of the hardest things for us as a superintendent in a school committee is that we've never had this kind of money before. We've never been in this position before.
Right.
But I do feel confident that that the work that Matt and I have done analyzing the budget and carrying it through, we can be assured that we can sustain this. And space is certainly an issue. Fred, you're right about that. We're going to have to get more used to in our school buildings that I don't have my classroom that just belongs to me and I stay there all day. There's going to be somebody else in that in that room when I'm on my prep, or when I'm in my PLG group or whatever. We're going to have to get used to sharing a lot more, but this is going to give a lot to our kids. It's going to give our kids a lot more resources and on-demand instructional services that they really need. So that is definitely a point, is that we will be sharing our spaces a lot more than we have in the past.
And when are the hires going to take place?
And so we would hope to get going on the hiring now. I would think that in some of the teaching positions, if it's somebody who's like finishing up college and is available, we'd actually like to bring them on for a couple of months right now. We put some money aside. We had talked about this at our last school committee meeting. We had the, Matt, I forget what that additional funding was called.
Coronavirus prevention, state level.
Yeah, so we got that extra $500,000 and put money aside so that we could hire people now. And what that would do, Fred, is give us some built-in substitutes so that when a teacher calls in sick, we have somebody right there who can step in, somebody who's part of the community. We're not bringing in a stranger to do coverage in the middle of COVID. You know what I mean? It would help us with all of that. And it would also give us an opportunity to start onboarding new teachers prior to the start of next school year, so they can hit the ground running when the kids arrive.
But the buildings are we're hoping to bring the other kids back into school. I mean, just the confusion of everything that's going on, and to have new personnel on, and then you start giving benefits from now. They'll carry them through the summer. I just don't. I don't know. I mean, every time I hear that there's subs, it's always been a problem. But you can hire, if they're in college and they're graduating and they want to do some sub work, I don't think they should be full-time people. I'm sorry. I just think, even though the money's there, but I mean, it's such a thing as overdoing it, Diane, and I'll leave it with that. You've got enough on your plate, but I'm overwhelmed.
Susan, are you there?
Susan texted me and said that she was just finishing up work. So I think she might not be logging on. I think she thinks that we're probably almost done.
I just have a couple of observations. First of all, I don't know how accurate the salaries are that you have, Diane, but I think with the space being a problem, the medical insurance being a problem, I think that 6.4 million you have is going to be probably 8 million. And so you know that most of the people are taking insurance. And like Fred said, where are we going to put them all? We don't have enough room now. We have to use cafeterias for teachers. I just think it's an awful lot. It's a great wish list, but some of the stuff, I'm not sure that you need to do them all right now. I mean, you
Yeah,
can take
no, and you're 100% right, Michael. And I don't think that we would be able to do them all right now. I think that a lot of these positions are things that wouldn't start till next year, especially like the administrator positions. Whether those get filled internally or externally, those are most likely people that are currently in a job and under contract until
Right.
the end of the school year. I do think that there could be a handful of these jobs that we could fill now, and it would get people on board. We certainly wouldn't overstep. Like, we wouldn't try to fill all of these right now and realize that we're running into a funding issue. We have a set amount of money that Matt and I have targeted out of that grant to go to hiring now. And I forget, I have it on one of these spreadsheets. I'll get to it in a minute. It was a couple $100,000. So it would mean about 10 or 15 positions that we could hire now and would give us that leeway with sub coverage. But we certainly wouldn't be able to fill all of these right now, but we could start to look at things like with the tradesperson position, if there's somebody internal who's currently a custodian and is able to do that work and wants to request a transfer, then we could start onboarding that now and start advertising for a new custodian. And all of this stuff is really iterative and it takes months to do. So waiting to start until July means that we're in our August rush that we're always in when we're saying we still need this many more teachers and we haven't found them yet. That's just what we're trying to avoid by doing some of the hiring now. And even
Excuse me,
some of the
Diane,
people,
that's not what I'm referring to. You can hire them now, but they don't start till September.
I was just going to say, the majority of people that we interview right now and want to start won't start until September. But having the leeway to do that interview process now, and in some cases, actually bring people on board now would be helpful to us.
But Diane, on this list, there's roughly about 130 people, forget the stipends. Is there a way that you can like narrow it down to what we have to have this? I mean, it's a great list, but there's got to be people there that we need now and sort of push the other stuff off. I just can't see us hiring all this stuff. I mean, granted, you might hire half of it, a third of it, but for us to commit $6.5 million to the list, and then every year you're going to have to give raises on top of that and insurance, whatever. I just think it's a little bit dicey.
No, I know what you're saying, Michael. And our point would be to get going on the list and start the work and just not wait until July to start the work. But when we did these, I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet for a minute. When we did these calculations, the need to maintain services and also our estimates on Schedule 19, these increases are because of the additional staff and the health insurance. Matt and I calculated that in. And that's why we went with, that's why we stopped here. I mean, you can imagine that we could have, in our dream world, added even more positions, but we felt like the 6.5 was a safe number. And then if we find out 2 years from now, it really was the right number and we still have some wiggle room, then we can look at what's our additional wish list, what's our new wish list. On the other hand, if we run into a jam, which I don't think that we will, I think that Matt and I have done a good job here, but if we run into a jam, then there are some pieces here that we could look at 4 or 5 years from now and say, that was great that we had all of those coach positions, but we can't afford them anymore. And so we're going to eliminate those coaching positions. And, you know, I don't know what else we would look at here. We'd have to see where we are 5 years from now, but we can we'll certainly, if we run into a budget problem, have to make those difficult decisions. But right now, we can benefit from these jobs and increase massively all of our teachers and all of our administrators' collective ability by capitalizing on what we have the ability to take advantage of right now.
But I think it's a little bit dangerous playing with future earnings because nobody knows what's going to happen, what you just said. You know, who knows what's going to happen? And you don't want to get a position. You got a person there for 3 years, you got to let them go because we don't have the funding for it. I mean, it's sort of leveraging the future to a degree. And I mean, I just always look on the conservative end. I trust nothing that goes on with the state, as you can see what they do. And I just think it's a lot. Just my own opinion. Just think it's a lot. What do you want from us then, Diane?
Well,
Michael.
Go ahead, Carol. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a point that bothered me before about the paraprofessionals. You know, I always felt that it was such an inequity to be sort of balancing the budget on the back of the people who were the poorest and who had the least financial ability and other abilities to withstand all of that. I think it's very important to have full-time people when you can have them, show the respect to them and give them the benefits, because everybody knows how important health insurance is and dental insurance. People know that, and that's what they want. And I think you get great, you get great service back. You get their heart and soul into the system, as opposed to just their time and their expertise, which is of course very important too. But you know, I've been through it, and Michael, I can understand how you feel, and Freddie too, because we have been through it other times when we had teachers and we hired them, and then we had to have layoffs, and that was god awful. So I am concerned about that, but never have we had this kind of commitment from the state and the feds. And I don't want to not take advantage of everything that we can. And if there is to be internal movement, I'd like to see it starting now. For example, some of the positions, I think when we have interventionists and we have other things, and we have people there and a new theater person, and, you know, maybe somebody who wants this job or that job and always wanted to teach social studies, but has been in a job for which they are certified, but not loving. This will give them a chance to look around and say, wow, I might be able to go to something else. That's rejuvenating. And I think it's something that we want to offer our staff. Look around and see what there is. If there's something there that you would like, you've been good, we'd like to reward you with that. And then see what happens afterwards. It's terrible to wait until July. And then I know I've been in the position, then you hire someone and they're going to come and they come back to you, you know, in 2 weeks and say, sorry, you know, I told you I was coming, but I'm not, I've got another job here. So it's better to get people, if you can, on. And if we have the room for them and we can use them as substitutes, and they can get to learn what our culture is, because that's really important for people who are coming in from outside the city. I just see a real benefit to it. It is a dream come true. And I don't want doubt to prevent us from taking advantage of it. I'm just more optimistic than that. And I think that we don't really have anything to lose from it. I trust their speculation about what will happen with our money. And it seems to me that we will get so much more out of it if we're starting now and getting people in place. Thanks.
Okay, Diane, what do you need from us?
Michael, can I make a comment, please?
Yeah, go ahead.
My
Yeah, go
hand's
ahead.
been up for an hour. I'm tired. So my first comment, it's in response to what Carol said in regards to paraprofessionals. But first off, we have to realize this is one time that we're only getting this money, one time. So we need to be able to keep on, be able to finance these positions forever. And let's face it, we're not ones that will say we're going to lay you off because we don't have the money. somehow that never happens. And I would hate to see it happen.
Oh, it
My
does.
comment, Carol, is the paraprofessionals, being one for 18 years, along with so many others, we never felt that there was a lack of respect, and we always gave 110% to our positions, even though we were part-time. So being a part-time person doesn't mean that you're the low end of the totem pole, or you're going to do any less work or feel not respected. I always felt respected in my position in the Revere Public Schools. So I hope no paraprofessional ever feels that way. But then,
Well, Stacy, if I can answer that, I never said that they felt disrespected in that way. I said, I made clear about what the point was. When you're hiring someone and you are putting on the backs of those people the lack of the kind of service. I know lots of people want to work part-time, which is fine. It's great. But most people who come in need the health insurance. They need to be a full-time in order to get that. And if we have the opportunity, as far as how far, this is not just a one-shot deal. We just was shown a terrific budget and exactly how long this was going to last. We were talking about 7 years. And
we're not talking
can't
7
go much
years.
beyond that. We were talking about that earlier, the superintendent was, about how much money we'd have. And they projected the whole thing.
I'll defer to Matt, but that is what we were trying to show, is that with this plan, with these salaries, with this $6.5 million in salaries, we've accounted for additional health insurance in Schedule 19 and anticipated annual raises and all of that. And with that said and done, we feel like we can project out securely for those 7 years, including SOA. And, you know, as Michael pointed out, he's not wrong. We never know what's going to happen at the state level. There's a possibility that the rug could get pulled out from under us, but it's unlikely. It's very unlikely that that will happen, because it's a state law that they fund the Student Opportunity Act over the next, it was going to be 7 years. Now it's 6 years.
6 years.
So, Matt, do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So from a CFO point of view, the primary question here is, even if we spread this bonus coronavirus related grant money over 2 or 3 years, are we headed for a cliff in which we're unable to sustain a staffing level that we've built up over those years?
Mhm.
That's what you're
Right.
saying to me. We can't do that. The spreadsheet that Diane has built and that we worked on together shows the way that we're making sure that doesn't happen is by not spending every possible penny of our net school spending allotment, as we're allowed not to, and amassing some of those funds into something of a reserve fund so that it is available to bridge us when the coronavirus related grants run out. So we're proactively going to be doing that over the next 3 years, so that in the subsequent 3 years, if we have to lean into additional funding, we've got it in a reserve fund in that way.
Mhm.
And then the assumption that everyone has said, which needs to be said, is this assumes that the SOA promises are going to stick. If they do, it would be like if you make $100,000 and someone said to you, hey, I'm giving you a $10,000 raise. You would go, wow. And then you would assume that the next year, instead of making 110, you might make 112. Well, imagine them coming back and saying, I'm giving you another $10,000 raise, and then another one, and another one, and another one. In 7 years, you're making $170,000 a year when you had been making 100. You're going to find ways to spend that money on your vision for your life. That's all you're doing. Just add 3 zeros to that. The Student Opportunity Act is changing the game for the Revere School District, and we're trying to wisely grow into that knowing that it's a promise right now, and the first year has been given to us in black and white, and we want to grow into that wisely, but we do want to grow into that. That's why it's coming there. So that spreadsheet that shows 7 years is taking all three of those things into account. We're going to invest heavily and quickly over 3 years because of coronavirus money. Then we're going to bridge any gap that may be there by wisely amassing a reserve fund from carry forward. And as long as the SOA money comes in those 6 or 7 installments, we'll continue this conversation each year and say, and here's possibly another new chunk of money to use on educational vision. So you should have confidence in those numbers that they're telling that story.
So before my comment to Carol, my question was going to be to Diane. And seeing that, I mean, I look under the district-wide staff along with Director of ELL, and 3 of them are new positions. Is it possible, and those are 4 positions that I think we need sooner rather than later. Is it possible to perhaps put together what their job would entail, or their responsibilities would be entailed to, so that we would feel comfortable putting that forward?
Yeah, I have the Human Resources Officer job description drafted, and I should have sent that to you. We've been working with our colleagues in other districts who have these positions, and they've very generously given us their job descriptions, and we've used those to pull together. The communications coordinator one we just got today from Somerville.
You know what? And I've gotten 3 of those. I got Everett, I got Somerville, and I got Springfield.
That's great.
So
we don't have Springfield. If you want to send that to us, that would be great. We have the Everett, and we have the we just got the Somerville one. So we're working on that in our side jobs. But we are working on that. So
I just feel that those are 4, I mean, not that the even the Director of ELL is going to be changing up soon. So it would be nice to maybe see where you want to go with that position or how you want to handle it. But I mean, I definitely think we don't have to wait till spring or something. Those are, I mean, in Human Resource Office, we need yesterday.
I agree. And it would be nice with the Parent Information Center coordinator and the Director of EL World Languages. It would be nice to have those people in place to transition with Albert before he retires at the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Diane, what do you want us to do?
Mr. Mayor's hand is up.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just really quickly, I want to go back to the a little bit of the commentary on SOA. I think that it's really important for us to understand that as difficult as it is to rely on what the state does, they've put a stake in the ground in terms of investment for districts like Revere, and knowing that the commitment that has been made by the legislature and this administration, I think we can take to the bank that for the next 7 years we're going to see what we're planning to see in terms of funding, and I know that may not be, not everyone may agree, or maybe not everyone wants to fully trust the state that they're going to come through on that. But I think with the amount of effort and the time and how long we've waited for this kind of really transformational change in funding, nobody's backing away from that, right? And so the stake has been planted around like, okay, these dollars are going to be committed to these districts in this way. And there are going to be other things that maybe fall off if we do hit, some kind of recession, or if we hit some bumps in the road, there are going to have to be other things that get cut. But I don't see this being one of them. So I just wanted to kind of make that statement, because it absolutely is transformational. And I don't think everyone really fully understood or appreciated what it meant when that bill got signed and when it went into law and enacted. And now we're seeing the fruits of that. And it's very good for the district. It's good for the children and the families of our city.
Thank you.
All right, so let me go on to the next page, and I just want to talk about the non-salary pieces that we're hoping to fill. And again, this is somewhat malleable. All of the work that you're going to see described are things, especially when we get to the facilities and IT details, that can't necessarily happen in 1 year. But they could happen over the next 2 or 3 years. And so that's where there'd be a little bit of budget flexibility as well. And when we have more time to sit down and think about it with Jonathan and Carl, we'll try to map that out a little bit more specifically. But if I go to the non-salary page, there are a number of items here that we want to make sure get included in this new budget. The first is partnership with Harvard and the Deeper Learning Dozen. That's a lot of the important work that we've been doing around student-centered learning and making sure that kids are having experiential learning opportunities. So we definitely want to maintain that. It's a short amount of money, especially when we think about the budget that we're talking about. They want to look at a new elementary math curriculum and a new literacy curriculum. There are other curricular pieces that we want to do, but we're trying to pace that out too. So you might see next year that we're proposing something new for social studies or history or some other discipline. The middle school is going to do a science curriculum pilot. And again, like we're happy to do science at the middle school because the elementary is going to be looking at math and literacy. And we're even debating on those two if one needs to wait until year 2. But all of that fine tuning will happen as long as we're on board with the philosophy here. The IT department has suggested about $1.5 million in upgrades. I'll go into the details on those in a minute. The maintenance department has suggested about $2 million in upgrades. I can't remember what this is.
I think it was furniture, fixtures.
Oh, thank
and-
you. Yes, it is. Yeah, sorry, my brain's a little bit fried at this hour. But we wanted to anticipate about $60,000 in new furniture purchases. I know one of the main priorities is the Garfield building cafeteria furniture, which is very dated and in want of replacement. Oh, that's the next one. And then also library furniture in the Garfield, which hasn't been replaced in almost 25 years since the building was built. And we have some funding here for professional development. We mentioned on the previous page stipends for mentors. They need to be trained before they can be a mentor. We talked about having a restorative practices coach. We also want to do some coursework that Dr. Garcia has arranged through Tufts University on restorative practices. We need training for the new PLG facilitators, and we want to do more of the competency-based learning training that we've been doing over the last several years. And you'll see down here a large line item of $6 million. And this is the project that the mayor alluded to earlier. One of the things that we've had some initial conversation about is being able to revitalize the McKinley building, which would really be a substantial renovation. It would probably cost close to $18 or $20 million. And the city would be contributing a large chunk of that. But we would like to give a portion of our funding so that we could have an early childhood center there and move our early childhood classes out of the schools that they're in currently, which would afford us more of the space that Fred was talking about, that we don't have enough space. It would give us back 9 classrooms, which isn't a huge amount, but it's a start. And it would
Yeah.
also let us concentrate our early childhood center in one space. And, you know, one of the main objectives of the early childhood program is to help kids learn how to socialize. And having them together at the McKinley School would enable that. And the kind of renovation that we're talking about is basically redoing the whole interior, a whole new heating and HVAC system, an elevator to make the building ADA compliant and handicap accessible, and a whole lot of other work. I don't know, Brian, if you want to speak a little bit more to that.
So we've met internally a little bit about this, and I think the general concept is one that we're in agreement on. It's going to be figuring out what exactly the details are in terms of how we renovate that building. But the initial thoughts have been around, placing, having a elevator in the center of the building, right at the front entrance, and splitting up the space so that there's the early education center piece and some community space as well. But this is long overdue. I know everyone's looked at the McKinley as a real a space with a lot of opportunity, and so with the infusion in cash, both in the school district side and the city side, Dr. Kelly and I thought that this would be a good opportunity to leverage some of our dollars together to rehab that space.
And I'll add that one thing that I still need is, and we won't have this until May, confirmation that we can spend the ESSER 3 money this way. The preliminary information that I have from DESE, but they're still waiting final guidance from the federal government, is that this would be, that we are going to be able to use the ESSER 3 money to do facility renovations and pieces like that. So we still need full permission to do this, but this is something that we'd like to target some of that funding for if we're able to when we do our grant application.
Diane, is the city going to use part of the building too, or is it strictly for the school department?
No, I think, as Brian just said, it would be like a mixed use. So we were talking a little bit about in order to make this work and be able to expand our early childhood program so that we could have a few more classrooms than we have right now, which we have a need for, we would have about 1.5 floors, and the city would have the other half of that floor, and there's other space like in the basement. We were talking about, there's a lot of space actually on the 3rd floor. If those who remember when they were up there's the cafetorium, which is a large space, but there's also a full attic space over the addition, which is the side that goes over to the parking lot, right? Like if you're in the middle of the building and looking toward the post office, there's a
It's all behind the stage.
Yeah, but that all could be turned into workable space. The ceilings are tall enough. It would just be about constructing some walls. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And it would be an extensive renovation, like obviously having the restroom facilities primarily in the basement with 2 small water closets, one on the 1st floor and one on the 2nd floor, is not sufficient. We would be looking at installing usable bathrooms on every floor in the building and, doing upgrades like that.
Anybody have any questions? Freddie?
I miss my McKinley School. I want to keep it as is.
It'll look as is on the outside.
Oh, but inside, you know what? That was a school where all the families looked after each other. Every teacher knew every family inside and out, and it was the good old days.
Go ahead, Freddie. Go ahead.
Michael, I think that the parties should be well aware of when there was talk of renovating McKinley School. Large sums were thrown out due to the fact of plumbing, electrical, I mean, everything had to be done. I think Diane's estimate is probably on the low side, so I think that they better get some pretty accurate expenditures. I mean, the brick was solid, the roof was solid, but everything else was kaput. And I also understand that over the years, the usage through the police department and non-usage have really put a damper on it. So I think, I mean, I love hearing what's proposed. And I think that it's probably one of the few schools when we closed, I don't know, 16 of them, that this is the only one. I'm not going to say what happened to the rest because I don't want to put the whammy on them. But I wish Godspeed on this. And I think it'll help, as Diane, I mentioned earlier, space. But I think that this is going to be a project that's beyond the script for the school department with the city help. But
Yeah.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just point out that figure is only the school portion, not the city portion.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
20.
Thank you.
20 million.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me, wait a minute. Michael, you may be more aware of this. Do you remember when Dr. Dakin was superintendent? There was something between the city and the school department, what would happen to the building. The city there was something that they would move some offices from City Hall, and that was it. So maybe this is probably a fruition that can come true now between our usage and the city. And I applaud the effort on that. I think it's wonderful. Thank you.
And
I do remember that.
just so the committee knows as well, is that the city did bond, but never used
Right.
$2.5 million. So there is
Yep.
$2.5 million that was bonded that hasn't been used,
Right.
that we have kind of waiting to be used.
Good.
So,
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Brian.
well,
All right. I think we're getting close to the end. I'm sorry. I know it's getting late, but I just wanted to share a little bit about the vision for the IT department and the facilities department on the pieces that we want to work on there. So looking at the facilities spreadsheet, there are a number of projects here. And again, this is initial. We can decide that there are other projects that we also want to do next year or the year after, and make those decisions based on what our budgeting is. But this is these are pieces that Carl feels like need to be prioritized sooner than later. The first is a project to upgrade the domestic hot water system at Revere High School and to fix the HVAC unit in the auditorium. Replace pump controls. Truthfully, I don't know what those words mean. We want to upgrade the exhaust fan in the gym at Revere High School. It doesn't have the volume capacity that we would like for it to have. $1 million to update univents and controls at Beachmont. Upgrade the HVAC unit at the Lincoln Gym. Don't know what this one means either. Garfield exterior doors. We want to start, a lot of them have become rusted and old, and we want to start working on replacing them. The curtain wall on the front facade of the Garfield building has always had leaks. We want to take care of that and get that sound. They want to put in a dumbwaiter at the Lincoln School. One of the things that we've really run into a problem with in COVID times is moving food off of the first floor at the Lincoln. So that was a project Kyle wanted to put in. One of our pickup trucks is aged from 2009 and is now rusting on the under side of the truck, and so Carl would like to replace that with a new vehicle. Right now, we don't own a scissor lift. I'm losing my ability to speak. We don't own a scissor lift in the district, and every time we need one, which is probably 8 or 10 times a year, we have to rent one, and it costs $1,000 every time we rent it, and even more if we keep it for several days. So we think it would be a good long-term investment to just buy one and own it and have it on hand when we need it. We need the scissor lift every time we have to replace bulbs in a gymnasium or do things in the high ceilings of our auditoriums. So it would be a worthwhile investment and pay for itself after a number of years. And then, of course, the positions we've already discussed that. For IT, this is going to be more things that I don't know exactly what they mean, but I'll run through them anyway. This one's pretty easy. The first one for the update the TV studio and the local video distribution, and that would include upgrading the school committee room so that we can have both in-person people meeting and also have people Zoom into a meeting if need be, and still be able to televise the meetings on Zoom like we're doing tonight, and do things like that, and kind of have a mix of the current, what we're doing right now, always on Zoom, and the old, what we did when we were in person and hardly anybody would be able to come to the meetings. This is a system to help communication, as you can see here. It's a repeater channel that we have that allows us to communicate with the police department and across schools. Jonathan wants to invest in stronger firewalls. I don't know if you all heard about the issue in one of our neighboring school districts where their system was entirely hacked and they had to shut down, and it's all a mess. You'll recall we had a similar one that we were able to recover from thanks to our incredible IT team that was able to block it and stop it, but we had to replace all of our services. So Jonathan wants stronger firewalls.
Haverhill's going to be in that position for a while, I think.
Yeah, yep. They're in a lot of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
These switches are the things that control the internet. Oh, that's what I'll call them. He wants to, right now, in most of our classrooms, we've already started moving to the smart touch displays, which are more like a TV screen, but you can touch them and use them almost like a smart board. And we want to move further in that direction. In our classrooms that currently have smart boards with projectors, first of all, the projectors only last a year or two, so we're constantly replacing them. And even then, we have to buy replacement bulbs, which cost like $150 a piece. So it's very expensive, and replacing to the smart touch displays will save us money in the long run. So we'd like to continue that replacement process. We want to move to the enterprise edition of Google, which gives teachers a little bit more control when they're doing any kind of a remote lesson, or even if they're assigning work to kids in their Google Classroom when we're back to full in person. It gives different applications that are helpful to teachers. Network storage, training for IT staff, network printers to replace old and outdated services, additional licenses, 2 new printer IDs, and then phishing attacks. This helps us with our email. As you know, we frequently get the emails from Jonathan saying, please stop opening emails that are suspect. And then additional cameras to place near the bathrooms in our middle schools to help ensure good behavior there.
Diane, do I need to go to Aruba so we can figure out the Aruba airwave and licensing patent?
I can tell you.
I'm good at those things. I'm very giving that way.
I wish that was the case, Stacy. I'd go with you and investigate, but this is a brand name of these devices that allow access to the network from a remote space. So, but if we have to go to Aruba to find out how it got its name, I'm on board.
Okay.
I don't think that we can use school department funds. That would be inappropriate, but we could take a vacation time and investigate that.
Let's leave now.
I just gave up my week in May.
All right, and finally, Carol had asked a little bit earlier about the summer program, and so I just wanted to share what we're thinking of for that. And this is the coronavirus prevention grant at the top that Matt spoke about. We got $514,000 there. We are allocating 200 of that. It's actually a reclassification of money that we were gonna pay through ESSER 1 that instead we're going to pay through this this grant, because this grant needs to be expended by June. And so we had $200,000 that we had put toward funded for transportation in ESSER 1, but since we have until December to spend this money, we moved the transportation here. And then that's the 200,000 that I mentioned, Michael. We didn't want to hire everybody on that list, but that gives us a little bit of space to start hiring some people now. And then there's still $114,000 there, much of which will be used for supplies and materials for the summer programs. And then looking at ESSER 1, we got 2.2 million. We've already spent 1.6 of that, and we've got 661 remaining. And we're going to spend all of that on summer programming. And I'll note that the amount for the high school seems small at 50,000, but that's because we've applied for and are pretty certain we're going to get an additional $50,000 summer programming grant from the Department of Education. So the high school will actually have $100,000 for their summer spending.
Any questions, anybody?
Diane, isn't that the normal cost of special ed for the summer program?
So we have in our budget the regular special ed programming money, and this we want to supplement so that they can do some more extensive programming.
Great, because those students need it.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Any questions for Diane? Diane, is there anything we have to do tonight?
I think just give me a blessing. We're not actually voting on a budget or anything. Like all of these are moving parts. And so our next step will be, if we have a blessing, Matt will start working these new positions into the master budget. And that'll probably take us another week or two. We're still fine tuning the details of existing staff and making all of those changes. And then we'll get you a draft of the budget that will have the actual positions. And, you know, you might see in there, like on my list that I just showed you, it might have said 1 math teacher. By the time we're giving you the budget, it might be that we need 2 math teachers. And so you'll see some movement as we fine tune. But we just need to know that you feel like we're headed in the right direction and know that we can proceed. And I don't know if that actually requires a vote or how that goes.
I mean, basically right now, all the Ways and Means Committee can do is come back to the regular meeting and make a recommendation. And then we would have to vote on that.
Correct, yeah. Because this
Right.
is on your subcommittee.
Yeah.
So I need,
Well, yeah, I recommend, I'm not sure how it should be worded, but I move that we express our approval to the superintendent to proceed and to keep us posted on the projected budget and hiring process.
I'll second that. I'll second it,
But,
Carol.
we
But I
can't
think,
proceed because
Michael-
you need to, this is not a committee of the whole
Michael.
meeting.
No,
So you
this
cannot,
is what, no, if I didn't say it, I thought I did, but that we recommend to the entire committee.
We
And-
probably need a vote of the subcommittee, Carol, then it goes
Yes.
to the committee.
I agree. That's what
So
I
at
was
that point-
doing.
Okay, so at that point, Carol made a recommendation to the subcommittee to accept Diane's findings and for her to move forward. So the subcommittee needs to vote on it, and then it goes to the committee as a whole for a vote.
Correct.
Correct.
So the first thing is, Carol, are you up or down with this?
Oh, I'm up.
Anthony?
Yes.
Yes,
All right, Anthony,
yes.
I'm sorry, yes, and I say yes. At this point now, we're gonna get a committee of the whole vote on the recommendation of the Ways and Means Subcommittee. So we need a roll call
Right.
for that.
no, you can't. That has to be advertised.
Yeah, that has
We're
to be.
not- So it would have to be at our next regular meeting on the floor.
Well, then
Stacy,
how are you gonna
if
get
we-
Diane to go forward?
That's,
I'm just
We
asking.
can have a special
you
meeting.
can't. We can have another general meeting and you need to call
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
and then do it then, but you can't do that now. It wasn't advertised.
Well,
Right. I agree.
okay,
Diane, what's your time frame, Diane?
one of the things, I had mentioned that we reached a tentative agreement with the teachers union. Perhaps we could schedule a cow meeting next week that we could have this official vote and have the vote on the memorandum of agreement at that time.
And it does not have to be a cow meeting. It can be a regular school committee meeting. We're allowed
Okay.
to have more than one a month, God forbid.
Right.
So I would prefer it to be a regular school committee meeting.
Well, then you're gonna have to wait until the 20th then.
You don't have to wait. We can call a meeting 5 times a month if we want to.
Fine.
Okay,
Well, then you should pick a
I'll
date.
have Robin get in touch with everybody tomorrow, and hopefully we could schedule it for Monday or Tuesday.
But
And
I think that the superintendent the general consensus is that after the presentation this evening, that it's favorable. And I think that the superintendent can act accordingly. She's not going to be expending money. She's just going to put the mechanism in motion so that when the committee approves, then she's already got the door open and ready to act. So I don't know if we could vote for a vote of confidence. I mean, I'm not sure as to what the wording would be. If Diane is comfortable with having them tied up with the 2 meetings in a difference of a week, then so be it.
Well, I don't think a few days is gonna make much of a difference, Fred.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, Michael. So
Just do it.
let's.
Yeah.
Do it
Okay,
once, let's do it right.
but I think the presentation, I think that we've all had a say as to, our feelings on it. I don't see anything drastic changing it, so I think that she can act accordingly.
So she can wait till next week and do it.
Right.
Couple days won't make much of a difference, I'm sure.
No, and this is a public meeting. It's on YouTube, so the word will be out. People will.
Oh, it'll be out by
Understand.
yes. It'll be out in about 2 minutes, if it's not already out.
Mm.
All right, are we all set? So we need a motion to end this subcommittee meeting.
Move to adjourn subcommittee meeting.
I'll second
Aye.
that. So we're finishing at 5 minutes of 10 on Thursday night, I believe. So we'll see you at the next meeting, whenever that date is. Good night, all.
Good night,
Good night.
Michael.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you, guys.
you. Night,
Thank you all for
Diane.
your
Thank-
support.